The West's sanctions against Russia are already unprecedented, but the new administration of US President Donald Trump can still do much to tighten the screws on Moscow even more, writes the American magazine Foreign Policy. I think the Biden administration should have been more aggressive on Russian energy earlier. The caution they showed was the same as they were on military hardware. From a strategic perspective, holding up broader energy sanctions was like holding up arms sales, said Edward Fishman, a former senior US sanctions official and a fellow at Columbia University's Center on Global Energy Policy. As the article points out, the first and most obvious step the Trump administration can take is to ensure full compliance with the latest rounds of sanctions, including designating more than 180 tankers from Russia's so-called shadow fleet. Another option is to use the power of secondary US sanctions to punish buyers and middlemen of Russian oil who do not comply with the price cap, the magazine writes. That would require threatening sanctions on banks, refineries, or even ports in countries like China and India, which buy much of Russia's oil. Foreign Policy explained. As an alternative to such restrictions, the Trump administration could further expand sanctions against tankers, the publication suggested. The publication recalled that Europe is already considering its own sanctions for another 70 shadow tankers as part of the upcoming 16th package of sanctions against Russia. All of these options follow the same admittedly self-limiting playbook that has guided the Biden administration in recent years. The goal has always been to reduce Russian oil revenues, not to physically remove large quantities of Russian oil from the world market, which would send crude prices soaring and act as a major drag on growth worldwide, the article notes. It was in this context that, in his address to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Trump called on OPEC members to increase production in order to collapse oil prices, which would be a quicker and less subtle way to ensure a reduction in the Kremlin's revenues. Ultimately, it is the remaining uncertainty about where to find additional barrels of oil that makes the last and most powerful remaining US sanctions so difficult to use. It is noted that the United States took a small but important step in that direction earlier this month by imposing blocking sanctions on 2 small Russian companies, but has not yet affected the largest companies. The Biden administration laid the groundwork with sanctions against Gazprom Neft and Surgut Neftgas, but not against Rosneft, Lukoil, Gazprom, or Novatek. Fishman said. He added that by banning dollar transactions with these companies, the sanctions will make it much more difficult for Russia to sell oil and gas, and that is the strongest option.
A magnitude 5.6 earthquake shook buildings in Taiwan on Thursday morning, as a series of tremors hit the island, causing little damage but possibly portending more seismic activity in the near future. According to Associated Press, the biggest of the quakes hit at 10:11 a.m. in Jiayi County's Dapu Township at a depth of 10 kilometers, according to the Central Weather Agency and the U.S. Geological Survey. The epicenter was about 250 kilometers south of the capital, Taipei, where buildings swayed slightly. That was followed shortly afterward by at least a dozen smaller quakes in Dapu. No damage or casualties were immediately reported. All were aftershocks from a magnitude 6.4 earthquake that struck Dapu on January 21 and sent 15 people to the hospital with minor injuries and damaged buildings and a highway bridge. In Tainan City, the outer wall on an abandoned building fell and hit 2 cars on the roadside, but no one was injured or trapped, local media reported. In Jiayi, rocks and boulders which fell from a mountain blocked a highway. A landslide occurred in the mountainous area of Nanxi District, in Tainan, and dust and sand were seen falling from the mountain. There are no reports of casualties so far. Taiwan is going through a period of increased seismic activity that could lead to further aftershocks or new quakes, according to the CWA and earthquake experts. Taiwan lies along the Pacific Ring of Fire, the line of seismic faults encircling the Pacific Ocean from Chile to New Zealand, where most of the world's earthquakes occur. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un inspected a facility that produces nuclear material and called for bolstering the country's nuclear capability, state media reported on Wednesday. According to Associated Press, the report of Kim's visit suggests a continued emphasis on an expansion of North Korea's nuclear arsenal, just after the start of Donald Trump's new presidency. The official Korean Central News Agency reported early Wednesday that Kim visited the nuclear material production base and the Nuclear Weapons Institute. It didn't say when the visit took place, and where those facilities are located, but North Korean photos of Kim's visit indicated that he likely visited a uranium enrichment facility that he went to last September. That visit was North Korea's first disclosure of a uranium enrichment facility since it showed one to visiting American scholars in 2010. During the latest visit, Kim praised scientists and others for producing weapons-grade nuclear materials and in strengthening the nuclear shield of the country. On Sunday, North Korea said it tested a cruise missile system, its third known weapons display this year, and vowed the toughest response to what it called the escalation of U.S.-South Korean military drills. North Korea views U.S. military training with South Korea as invasion rehearsals, though Washington and Seoul have repeatedly said their drills are defensive in nature. In recent years, the United States and South Korea have expanded their military exercises in response to North Korea's advancing nuclear program. The start of Trump's second term raises prospects for the revival of diplomacy between the United States and North Korea, as Trump met Kim 3 times during his first term. The Trump-Kim diplomacy in 2018-19 fell apart due to wrangling over US-led economic sanctions on North Korea.